Walking the serpentine path, following the footsteps of the ancestors. Walking the serpentine path, making our way back home. Hey ya, hey, hey ya, ho, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ho. Hey ya, hey, hey ya, ho. Following the serpentine path. Life. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Serpentine Path podcast. My name is Claire Waudia Seed, and I'm a plant walker, song keeper, word weaver, artisana, visual and performance artist, womb wisdom keeper, and your guide on this serpentine path of life. Together, we'll dive deep into all things related to plant medicine, ancestral reconnection, intergenerational healing, womb sovereignty and bodily autonomy, rites of passage and initiation, time travel, shape-shifting, dimension hopping, the reclamation of our collective earth-based practices, and the ongoing, never-ending cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Welcome to the serpentine path where the ancestors have called us back to. Let's start at the end and find our way back home together. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Serpentine Path podcast. My name is Claire Waudia Seed. I am your host, and today it is my great pleasure to welcome a dear friend and companion on the plant path, someone who I've known for a few years now. It's been really wonderful connecting, always hearing what he has to share, and it's a great gift to be able to introduce him to you all. His name is Leo van Veenendaal. Welcome. Did I say that right?
Close enough. Van
Oh, how
Veenendaal.
is it? What is it?
Leo Van Veenendaal.
There we go. Nice and Dutch. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. Very excited to chat, and it's been so nice to watch your journey over the past, I think, 3 years we've known each other. So excited to chat.
Yeah, thank you. You as well. So let's start with the question that I ask all of my guests, which is if your ancestors were here with us now, which of course they always are, how would they introduce you and what role would they say that you play in your family lineage?
Ooh, good question. So I have a really interesting thing with my mother's side, and we have like this unbroken chain of kind of the same soul reincarnating. And I think of myself as, very similar to my mum, except I'm living in Peru and she's a corporate lawyer. And she was like a reincarnation of my grandfather, who was a reincarnation of his mum. And so it kind of goes male, female, male, female. And, I think of myself most closely as my grandfather, very similar life story, very similar like milestones we passed through at similar ages. And yeah, I guess that's the easiest way to explain it. A very interesting lineage through my mother's side. And then through my father's side, there's a connection to tobacco. So my great grandfather was a cigar maker in Amsterdam. And then all of my grandparents, my parents smoked tobacco, and their lives were better when they were smoking. And for me, my life took off and got much better when I started smoking tobacco, not cigarettes, but organic jungle tobacco. And yeah, so I guess that's it. An interesting lineage with my mother's side, and then a strong connection to tobacco.
Beautiful. And what role would you say, well, what role would they say that you play in your lineage?
I think a knot tire, someone who connects different worlds. So I started off as an engineer and then got very interested into plants. And my initiate name, Iniboga, which is a plant medicine I work with, basically means that I'm a connector, someone who connects different worlds. And yeah, I guess that's how I would explain my job in this life.
Yeah, I also feel I consider myself kind of what do I say? I always say I'm a bridge. I feel like a bridge between different worlds and different cultures and different perspectives. And I feel like a lot of the people who come on to this podcast are walking a similar path of what does it mean to come from very different worlds and to like try to bring it together and do all of like the translation work that's required. It's a beautiful path to walk and very similar to mine. I'll offer some people just a little bit of background for how we know each other. So, you and I met like I think almost exactly 3 years ago at this point in Ecuador. We met in ceremony, and you had already been pretty deep in your path, but mostly in Peru, and then a little bit also in West Africa with Iboga as well. So you had like done that part of your initiation, and then you had been in Peru for a few years. And I had been in Colombia with all of my studies. And we met actually in the middle, which is funny. Like Ecuador is right in between Colombia and Peru. So we met in the middle, and then we went off and kept doing our separate studies for the past 3 years. But we've always stayed in touch. And you've been a really, really helpful and wonderful resource to me over the years, especially when I was like very deep in the jungle. For those of you who might be listening for the first time, I lived in the jungle for full time for a year and a half with my late teacher, Abuelo Kerouin. Very intense process. I was there midwifing him and his wife, also my teacher, Abuela Maria, through their dying processes and drinking a very, very, very large amount of the medicine of Yahe, which is the Colombian brew of ayahuasca. And so I was deep in that process and very alone in that process for many months. And there were many times when I felt like I was absolutely losing my mind. And I'm the only white girl in this jungle, and no Westerners or anyone who has any concept of like what it's like to be this kind of a person in an indigenous village working deeply with medicine. And Leo was one of the few people who I knew who had gone deeper with the plants than I had, who had been on the path longer. And so I would reach out to him and be like, bro, I think I'm losing my fucking mind. There were like multiple times where I was like, I think I'm broken. I think my brain's broken. I think that like I don't know what's going on. And your response was always so helpful and grounding and clarifying because you were like, this is like a rite of passage, essentially. Like, if you've gotten to this point, like, keep going, you know? And that was so centering for me because I knew that if I had asked anyone else, they would have been like, you're out of your damn mind. Like, you need to come home and be medicated, you know, or like be institutionalized. Whereas you were just kind of like maintain your center, find your practices, find the things that are going to really ground you and keep you calm and like just keep going. And so that's been kind of our dynamic over the past 3 years. Which has been wonderful to be able to have someone who can actually understand on that level of what I've been moving through. And then we've also been able to connect a little bit more over the past few months as I've like deepened into a lot of my own work around the masculine, which is what this whole conversation is going to be about today. And so we have a lot that we want to cover. That's like a
Yeah.
good context to give people. I'd love to give you an opportunity now to share about yeah, your path, your life, what you're orienting towards, your projects, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, sure thing. So I'll start where we met. We met in Ecuador, as you said, and I'd been drinking medicine at that point for about 6 years. And when we met, I just finished my first period of time working with my primary teacher. And I did 45 days with him. And in that 45 days, at about the 30-day mark, I broke my brain as well. And was very worried I had no one to talk to about it, had, no one to cross-reference this with and understand it. And as you touched on, I think it is part of a lot of healers' practices, that the most effective way to really heal someone is to kind of break them down and to force them in a way, like a gentle invitation to help them let go of everything they've been holding on to that's not serving them and not working for them. And yeah, we met. I'd kind of just gone through my first experience of breaking my brain. And yeah, then I continued the next 3 years working with my teacher in the jungle. And my process wasn't living with him continuously for like years on end. I would do like a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, as long as I could go until I started to get too skinny and a bit too crazy. And then I would take, 2 months off, 3 months off, come back to the mountains, get my strength back, put some weight back on, and then go back to the jungle. And I did that for 2022 all the way through to the end of 2024, but basically going to the jungle for as long as I could afford to go for, both financially and physically and mentally. And then, yeah, my path to circle back to the very start started in 2016 with plant medicines. And I was very unwell. I had chronic, like stomach conditions, IBS, had anxiety and depression since the age of like 8 years old and treatment resistant. And in 2016, I was kind of so exhausted and so depressed and sick that I was willing to try anything. And I was studying as an engineer at the time, about to start work. And I came to Peru and had a miraculous healing. Within 3 ceremonies of drinking ayahuasca, I totally healed my gut and have had no gut problems since then. And then I started working on the anxiety and depression. And in my very first ceremony with ayahuasca, this very clear voice came to me and said, Leo, I will cure your gut, but your real work will start with iboga. And I was like, what the heck is iboga? Never heard of this thing before. And the next morning I was asking my friends, like, hey, have you guys heard of this thing called iboga, like ibogi, Ebola? Like, don't know what this is. And they were like, oh no, I think you mean iboga, which is a West African plant medicine, very intense. And they likened it to like an African version of ayahuasca. So that was in 2016, my first experience with plant medicines. And I waited 2 years to work with iboga. I finished my master's study and then went to Gabon in 2018 and worked with iboga. And that was, to this day, probably the single most profound and greatest healing experience I've had. I liken it to totally clearing the mind. And before working with iboga, maybe 98 out of 100 thoughts in my head were negative, depressive, anxious, really tough thoughts. And then after working with iboga, which is not an easy thing, it's a very serious experience, maybe 1 in 200 thoughts is negative, anxious, and depressive. And I can be like, oh, okay, I didn't eat well yesterday, I didn't sleep well, I drank alcohol, I had a fight with someone, and I can disarm these thoughts. So iboga really cleared my mind, gave me the gift of clarity and freedom from my own depression. And then since then, in the end of 2019 or start of 2020, I moved to Peru and then got scared during the pandemic, came back to Australia for a little bit, and then went back to Peru since 2021. I've been based there since 2021.
Nice. Yeah. You're the only person actually that I know. Actually, I know a few people who have like worked with iboga in a context that I wouldn't necessarily say is the most safe. But you're the only person that I know who has actually gone to Africa, who has spent time with the indigenous peoples and the guardians of that medicine, have like gone through a full initiation of it. And some of the stories that you tell me about your Iboga experience, I'm like, how is he alive? Like it's incredible, truly. And you also wrote a whole book about Iboga, which is also incredible. We can always link that in the show notes. But yeah, it is I don't know what to say about Iboga. Do you want to speak a little bit more about it before we get into other stuff?
Yeah, I can talk about it briefly. So my experience was so intense. It took me, I would guess, 6 months after working with iboga to really come back to earth. And, it was ultimately very positive, but it wasn't easy. And I didn't have anyone I knew who'd worked with it, apart from people I met there. And there's a lot of things I would have changed about how I prepared for it, how I handled the experience, how I integrated it afterwards. And so I decided to write a book just to help people. And the book is called The Iboga Experience. 55% of royalties from it go to conservation of Iboga, to a Gabonese-owned charity called Blessings of the Forest. And, somewhat fortunately, unfortunately, Iboga is calling me again. And most people only do one initiation in their life, some people two, and that's generally enough. And if you want to do a second initiation, people are advised to wait at least 5 years, preferably 10, for the second initiation to kind of understand it and integrate it. And yeah, I'm thinking that probably in 2026, I'll head to Gabon for the second initiation, which is kind of like meeting the Reaper. It's like, oh man, oh, here we go again. But yeah, it's been a very special plan to me and very grateful for the experience I had there.
Yeah, well, I love how the beautiful story about that is that you were working with ayahuasca, and ayahuasca was like your deepest work, like your next step is with iboga. And plants do that all the time. Like I've had so many experiences with different plants that have told me, like, actually go work with that plant right now. That's going to be the one that is going to teach you the most, or that's going to be the one that is going to guide you towards your deepest healing in this moment. Like, come back to me after you've done that. Which I think kind of is a beautiful segue into this next part, where when we were planning what we wanted to do for this episode, you offered a really great opening framework, which is to talk about two beautiful jungle plants, but they are kind of alive and well in different parts of the world, but they do definitely come from the jungle. One is the coca leaf, which is a very feminine jungle spirit. It's called like mama coca or like madre coca, a mother element, and then tobacco, which is generally seen as a much more masculine plant. People call it padre tobacco, father tobacco. It's used widely. And it's also interesting because I too have like a big lineage of tobacco use in my family, and I've gone through a big process of trying to figure out how to heal the shadow side of like deep addiction with plants. And what I would say deep addiction or distortion with the masculine, because tobacco is that masculine energy. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, yeah, starting out with this framework of like the masculine and the feminine in nature and how we see it with plants.
Yeah, sure thing. So in the lineages that I've studied with, tobacco was the first plant medicine. And it was the medicine that explained the jungle and explained, okay, work with this plant for colds, work with this plant for rashes, work with this plant for different reasons. And it was the plant that connected humans to the knowledge of the jungle. And I think in a lot of contexts and examples, the masculine archetype comes first. And then the masculine kind of clears the way, clears the path in the jungle for understanding and for connection. And coca, I think both plants initially come from like the cloud forest, like on the edge of the jungle. And they can be grown in the jungle, but the ancestral home of tobacco is the Andes, very close to where I live in the cloud forest here. And yeah, I think the synergy of combining both tobacco and coca is a really good metaphor for life, of being in balance with both masculine and feminine. And when they're in balance and they're treated with consciousness and respect and not being abused, magic can happen.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's beautiful what you speak to of the tobacco coming in first and clearing the way, because tobacco has this energy that I think about of the yang. The yang is like the master of time. And so it's going to take like all of this information and data that it's receiving externally, and it's going to find a way to create like a very clear through line and step-by-step process in order for that information to be delivered. And so when I think about the tobacco coming in first and like seeing everything and being like, okay, my job here is to create order, to create structure, to create a clear through line for everything to be burst through. It's a beautiful interweaving with the feminine that then comes in with the coca. Like when I can speak from my lineages of what I've learned from with tobacco and coca, specifically from the Muroi people. So my late teacher, Abuela Maria, was from the Muroi people, from the Colombian and Peruvian Amazon. And in their culture, the women do not work with the coca internally. They don't chew the medicine of mambe. That's their medicine, mambe. They don't work with it internally, chewing it, because, I mean, a lot of reasons, one of which is that it can cause very severe issues with the female hormonal matrix. But the other part of it is that coca is this like extremely, extremely expansive energy with which like women, when we are in our yin, when we're in our feminine energy, we are already extremely expansive. Coca is also a medicine that people use in talking ceremonies. Men, generally speaking, are not nearly as verbal as women. Women are like hyper verbal. We're always talking. Honestly, like often far too much. We're always sharing information. And so when we are working too deeply with the coca, the shadow side of it that can make women sick, both like physically but spiritually, is like complete lack of clarity and understanding and the power of our words. And I've seen a lot of women, including myself, get really sick from this when working with mambe continuously, working with coca continuously, and not having a really, really clear understanding of our hyper verbality and how that impacts people, particularly men, how we're showing up with men, which is why it's a more useful medicine from that lineage that I'm in, the Moroi lineage. It's a more useful medicine for men because men, generally speaking, do need a little bit more of an invitation and do need a little bit more support to step into like their verbal expression. And so coca is a beautiful tool in that way. Whereas the tobacco is what the women only work with. They are only working with the masculine. They work with the medicine of the ambil, which is a tobacco paste with salt. And you see women pretty much all day long, they have it in their pocket and they're like licking it off their fingers. And it's a protection medicine more than anything, actually. The tobacco for them is a protection medicine. And so women never walk out of the house or go into the jungle without their tobacco on them. And so when you see how the women are working with the tobacco, it is really from a place of like what you were saying, literally going into the jungle, through the jungle with their tobacco, their little protector, keeping them safe and keeping them focused because women can be so like all over the place. And it's what really brings them into center.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And I think you said a really interesting thing that the tobacco is the protective spirit and it's the connector, conscious connection and protection in the jungle and in daily life. And then coca is the expansive element or expansive power that fills in the gaps. And, I've had two good friends that chewed too much coca. And coca to me is such a powerful plant, but also it's kind of a plant that doesn't care and will take souls and will empower people, but ultimately doesn't care what you do with the power. And I think that's why tobacco is very important to keep someone grounded, to keep someone focused, to keep them mindful of their words, and to create that balance because, too much expansion, too much of the hyper verbality can be a dangerous thing.
Yeah, 100%. And you also said something really interesting and beautiful about tobacco in that you said I think it was during a dieta that you did with tobacco, where you were praying and you had this very clear understanding that when we're praying with a tobacco, we're not just sending intentions, prayers, thoughts, words, energy outwards like an arrow, but we're also, with the amount of energy that we're sending out, that tobacco is also kind of, how to say, like imprinting into us. Do you want to speak more on that?
Yeah, sure thing. And you said it well. Um, I see tobacco as a bridge, and the bridge goes both ways. And so when we're praying for someone, we're sending energy, our thoughts, intentions out to someone or something, but we're also opening up the space around us. So it's very important to be mindful, okay, what's my intention smoking? What's the environment that I'm consuming the tobacco in? Am I being clean? How am I sitting? How am I addressing other people? Because it's a powerful bridge and it opens us to receive energy and also send energy out. And it took me a while to understand that, maybe like a year, 2 years of consciously working with tobacco to be like, oh, wait, like, okay, I'm really opening up here. And I have to be very mindful who I'm smoking around, what my intention is. And I got a really good lesson from one of my teachers here in Peru. And she was curing someone who had quite late stage cancer. And they were a lifetime smoker. And what she realized was that every time this person smoked, they were escaping an emotion or they were escaping a feeling. And when she was healing this person, she didn't let her smoke. And all these emotions that she'd been suppressing and using tobacco to escape from, and using tobacco to change her mind and kind of get in a different direction, had to come up and had to be witnessed and faced. And, tobacco is a bridge. We can connect to different emotions, different people, different states of mind. But if we're not letting these emotions be processed and not letting them come up and using tobacco as an escape, there is a price to pay. And so, yeah, for me, very important to be mindful when I'm smoking, very mindful, very important to be mindful of, okay, am I escaping something? Am I trying to suppress something or get away from something when I smoke?
Yeah. Yeah, it was bringing up for me my own process of working through my relationship with tobacco. And there's a lot of different tobacco medicines. There's obviously like cigars that you can work with. There's the ambil that is like the tradition of my late teacher Abuela Maria and the Moroi people, and a few different other groups. There's rape, which is like a tobacco snuff that can get blown up your nose. There's tobacco that you can drink that I've done. That's super intense. Tobacco purges are really, really, really intense. And my own relationship with tobacco, where I've seen the times where it's been genuinely really useful and really supportive, and the times where it has absolutely come from a much more codependent and addictive place. And I often tell women, because I've had to tell myself, like the way that you are relating to tobacco is the way that you are relating to your own inner masculine. It's the way that you're relating to your father and your masculine lineage, so your father line. And it's the way that you are relating to any male partners and just men in general in your life, men in general. But like I've noticed the times that I've really struggled the most in my dynamic with tobacco have been the times that I have felt under resourced with my internal masculine, internal yang, and also not safe with the men in my life, with the partners that I've been choosing, with like the masculine energy that's being reflected back at me. And so then I'm turning to tobacco, being like, save me, essentially. And tobacco's like, that's not my job. And it's what you just spoke to of like, you can't run to it to try to escape your feelings. You can't run to it to try to abandon yourself, actually. Like you come to tobacco with a really, really clear understanding that this is a relationship that we've built. And what kind of a relationship do I want to continue with you? The plant is going to be like, I'm here no matter what. It's up to you. It's your choice. It's really on like the human being to decide how am I going to um what's the word? Like how am I going to walk with you? Really? At the end of the day, how am I going to walk with you? Am I going to walk with you from this place of like need and desperation and addiction and using you? Or am I going to walk from a place of like peace, calm, serenity, trust, and working alongside you? And you could say the same thing for the coca and why people go to coca. I mean, coca is the plant that is used with cocaine, right? Who do we see the most who are using cocaine? Like guys on Wall Street, right? And so we see these men who are like trying so hard to be hyper vigilant, hyper aware, hyper verbal as well. They're on the phone, like yelling at people in China about stocks. And they're just like ripping lines of cocaine. And you're kind of like, okay, but like, why? What is the reason that you're coming to this mother energy that is actually hyperverbal, that is going to help you communicate, that is going to offer you the ability to share the word in a loving way, hopefully in a way that would create connection and community and bring people together. And the way that you're using it is not maybe the most loving. So that's for everyone to kind of figure out for themselves.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think you touched on a good point that for people stuck in, say, finance or very masculine professions, coca and cocaine, it could be seen as a medicine. It could be seen as that's how they self-regulate, it's how they keep themselves in balance. But for me, the spirit of coca is so smart and so powerful, and she doesn't really care how she gets in. She's like, oh yeah, I'll become Coca-Cola. I'll be the most widely distributed beverage in the whole world. Oh yeah, I'll be cocaine. I'll get into like upper society and all throughout the world. I'll get into crack cocaine. I'll be everywhere. She doesn't care. She's just getting in and that kind of there definitely is elements of distortion in, say, Coca-Cola and cocaine, but it's still the spirit of Coca. It's still the spirit of communication, of connection, of expansion, of, a feminine spirit coming in to help people in some way.
Yeah, it's funny. One of my teachers in the jungle, a woman, said to me, she was like, you have to chill out with the mambe. Like, you really have to chill out with the coca. Like, you don't actually understand that this medicine can be more powerful than ayahuasca. And I was like, what are you talking about? And totally didn't want to hear it at the time. Now, knowing what I know about my experience with Coca and the deep respect that I hold for her now, I'm like, oh, yeah, she is just as powerful as ayahuasca, you know? And to have that deep reverence and that deep respect. And I think sometimes people look at these plant teachers and they put ayahuasca on a pedestal, right? Without having any consciousness or understanding of what it means to really drive and navigate a plant like tobacco, a plant like coca, and to build a relationship with it in a healthy way. So there's a lot that we could say there, but I do want to move on. So you are currently writing a book, which is very exciting. And I'd love to give you the opportunity to speak about it and your perspective on divine masculinity and your own process with it and all that you are weaving with your words right now.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So the book is called The Divine Masculine, and I don't claim to be the divine masculine. I'm kind of trying to figure it out and learn it myself. And the book talks to 5 stages of growth all humans go through, males, females, everyone. And we all start off as the juvenile feminine, kind of this baby that's like a sponge. And the world is a dangerous place. We're hopefully protected by our family and community. And it's kind of like we get the imprints of society uploaded to us, and we're this sponge that's vulnerable and needs to be protected and can't go out into the world. And the next stage after the juvenile feminine is the juvenile masculine. And this is something everyone goes through. Everyone goes through all these 5 stages, hopefully. And the juvenile masculine kind of goes out into the world and creates chaos. And it's kind of like, oh, I'm the one that's going to fix the problems. I'm the one that's going to do this. I'm the one that's going to cause justice to be served in society. And I think most people in society are stuck in this stage. And that can be seen as people really hustling in their careers, um, people really trying to make their way in the world without the wisdom of understanding the chaos they're creating in trying to make their way in the world. And the next stage is the divine masculine, which is, that masculine archetype with the wisdom of understanding how the world works and understanding cause and effect, understanding, okay, I've got this particular skill set, I've got this particular ability and talent. This is my lane. This is what I'm good at. And I see the divine masculine as kind of the return to home. And it's someone who's gone out into the world. They've had their days of being at war with the world, and they return home, both to themselves and physically. And they learn how to create barriers. They learn how to create boundaries. They learn how to see, oh, this person's dangerous. This thing's dangerous. I have to, solve this before it becomes a big problem. And they create safety. And the whole point of that is to let the divine feminine flourish. And when someone feels safe within themselves, they've created a beautiful, safe home, a beautiful community with long-term friends, allies, good people in their life. When they feel safe and their environment is protected, then the divine feminine can flourish. And the divine feminine is all the good stuff that kind of makes life worth living. It's creativity, creation, joy, love, um, the really good stuff. And the final stage is divine union. It's someone who is in balance with all 4 of the previous parts. Like they know how to learn as the juvenile feminine. They know how to create chaos. They know how to be at war with the world as the juvenile masculine. They know how to create protection and safety as the divine masculine. And then they know how to create and they know how to express love and be a conduit for love and the higher frequencies of life. And that's divine union of knowing, okay, I have all these different elements to my soul, to my development, and I can call on them at any time I need to, and I'm in balance. And that's the 5 stages, and that's the framework of the book.
Yeah, super helpful and clear and succinct. And when you shared with me about this, when we were on the phone, kind of planning this episode, it was bringing up a lot of the learning that I've been doing deeply over the past 6 months, but longer in my life. But I feel like I finally have like clear language for it. And I think it is a perfect, how to say, like perfect progression and flow into what divine union looks like. And I think what's really tricky for women who might be listening to this, because I know a lot of women, a lot of my listeners are women. Women have a really hard time reconciling with the fact that, like, kind of that last part that you said of like, in order to get to their divine feminine, which I think all the spiritual girlies are like, divine feminine, la la la, you know? We all want it. I totally get it. I want it too. The really hard thing for us to comprehend is that in order to get to that part of ourselves, we have to first do the work of creating very clear inner structure of the divine masculine. And if you're someone listening to this who has a hard time wrapping their head around masculine, you can use the energy and the languaging of yin and yang, which has been very helpful in my own shift in understanding. So, in order for the yin to really flourish, like you were saying, like creativity, fertility, abundance, connection, community, relationship, family, all of that kind of stuff, that is, pleasure as well. Just doing things for pleasure's sake, enjoying time out in the sun, like listening to music, dancing, like really being in your fullest juiciness, feminine power. None of that is possible without a very clear internal yang structure, internal masculine, which is what you said of like clear boundaries, clear understanding of what is safety for me. How do I keep myself safe? How do I create a safe home and structure around me, an organization, and clear understanding of who I am and what I need and how I'm going to resource myself? In that way, you're not participating in extractive relationships where you're going to men and expecting them to do that for you, doing the internal work for you. You're able to show up in the feminine and to embody all of that juiciness and that joy and that play and that pleasure and to offer that like your cup overflowing. None of that is possible without the divine masculine. And some of my teachers say, like, when you're doing any kind of yin reverence work or divine feminine work, you want to like cultivate that. You don't cultivate the feminine. You don't do the feminine. There's no doing it. You create the yang structure, that masculine, so that that feminine can flourish. And then eventually you would reach divine union, which is like that internal masculine, that internal feminine, internal yin and yang are aligned, and at that point, hopefully, ideally, would be when you are meeting a partner and you're like, okay. And now this is when we can have, healthy relationship between us, like loving relationship that's not as extractive, and potentially create a beautiful foundation for a family, for a larger community based off of that. Because I'm not coming to you expecting to be my inner masculine. You're not coming to me expecting to be your inner feminine. Like we've aligned with that internally.
Yeah, I think you touch on a really great point, which is I think it's essential for people to go through these development stages themselves. And it's quite dangerous in the spiritual community and conscious communities where people can bypass things. And a really feminine woman can meet a very masculine man and not go through her own development of learning to set her own boundaries, learning to understand for her what works, what's dangerous, what's safe. And there is a lot of bypassing and kind of skipping steps, which I think leads to relationships that work for a period of time, but not for a long time. And as you were saying, like when someone has done the work and can meet someone that, you know what, I'm in balance with my masculine, I'm in balance with my feminine, that's when the real magic can happen, when people can really play off each other, but there's no dependency. It's not like, oh, okay, for me to be masculine, I need the feminine. Or for a woman to say, oh, I can only be feminine when I have a man in my life. And I mean, that's the goal. That's the point of my book, is to help everyone move from the stage of juvenile masculinity or like a false femininity into divine masculinity and then into divine feminine in themselves and not relying on a partner to skip steps.
Ooh, and I think you just touched on something very juicy, which people might not want to hear, but I'll say this because I can say it to myself. So I'll say it to you, listeners, which is if you're a woman who's like, I'm totally in my divine feminine, la la la, but you haven't created that internal structure, you're actually in your juvenile masculine. Ooh. Ooh, how does that feel, girlies? It might not be fun to sit with that like our current understanding of what we think is the most vibrant, fully embodied, I would say like truly mother archetype, right? If you think you're kind of at that point and yet your boundaries are still really shitty. And yet you're still really disrespecting yourself. You're still really not showing up with this kind of like inner warrior that takes no shit and is just like, I know my worth, I know my value, I know what works for me, what doesn't work for me. I'm going to show up in a loving way, but I'm going to show up in a loving way that doesn't betray me or betray other people. I'm not lying, I'm not being dishonest, I'm not manipulating, like I'm fully in that clean yang energy. If a woman can't really sit with herself and be like, that's where I'm at, you're not actually in your feminine. You're in your juvenile masculine, which is not a bad thing. The juvenile masculine is not bad. There's no like looking at this and saying that you did something wrong. As you're speaking to like your vision and perspective of this development, the juvenile masculine is a very important step. And it needs to be moved through. You need to move through the spiritual maturity and the development to get there in order to get to the divine masculine, in order to get to the divine feminine, in order to get to the union. Like there's steps, as you're saying. And something that's interesting that you touched on, I think a big shadow side for a lot of women, I can speak for my own experience of saying, I can only be in my feminine if my man is really masculine, which is a very clear indicator that you haven't created that internal safety in yourself because men need to have the support and the understanding from their partner that they can move into their own yin expression. Men also have their feminine, they have their yin. They need to be able to experience it fully. And so if you yourself are saying, I can only be in my feminine and feel safe when my man is totally in his masculine, and the moment that he moves into an expression of his yin, and you're deeply uncomfortable because you don't have an internal yang that can hold it, that's deeply disrespectful to your partner. That's not actual safety and that's not actual relationship with your partner because he can't come to you in his moment of need and say, I need you to hold the divine masculine for me for 20 minutes and not make it about you, right? Like really be with me in this. And so I offer that to women because it's a deep process that I've been in on my own of like, don't just do this internal work for yourself. Also do it because you want to be able to show up for men in a more loving and genuinely supportive way, not just romantic partners either. Like, you want to be able to show up for your dad like this if your dad is having a hard time. You want to be able to show up for your brothers, for your friends, for your cousins, for your sons, right? To be able to really hold that for them so that they can experience their feminine. Because men not being in touch with their feminine is also what leads to a lot of violence, which maybe that's like a different thread to go off of. I'll let you talk first.
Yeah, I think the key point of the juvenile masculine archetype is this falseness and living without wisdom. And it represents in different ways in men and women. And it's kind of like telling people you're something without actually being it. And so for young men, it's like, oh yeah, I'm the strong guy, I'm the smart guy, I'm the smartest guy in the room, or I've got all the answers. when really they don't know anything. And it's like they haven't even had the experiences to start developing wisdom. And the flip side for women would be like pretending to be something that they're not, and both manipulating themselves and manipulating the world around them to appear like something that they just aren't. And this is not to say it's a bad thing. I really don't like the label of toxic masculinity or toxic femininity. Sure, it exists, but I don't think it's so helpful to judge it. I think, as you were saying, it's really important to say, hey, this is a developmental stage. We kind of have to go through periods of time of pretending. We have to go through periods of time of trying different things and learning how they make us feel and learning what the causes and effects are of our actions. And yeah, I think a lot of women are trapped in pretending. A lot of young men and men are trapped in pretending. And the way out of that for me is action and then reflection on action. And to be like, okay, I was doing this thing, I was working really hard on it. How's it making me feel? How's my life turning out? And the way through it is accumulating wisdom through experience. And that's for both men and women.
Yeah, as you were speaking to that, something that was coming up for me is I feel like a beautiful gift of the juvenile masculine is this part of us that's really excited and wants to try a lot of things out. And we're basically trying to figure out what our life path is going to be. And so, in that way, then we also sometimes get overly excited and we say, oh, I am this, or I am this, or I am this, without putting in the time and the effort and the energy and the work and the education and the money and the labor and the blood, sweat, and tears to actually craft ourselves into that person. And so I feel like the juvenile masculine is how to explain kind of like all talk, no game a little bit, you know? Like kind of like I feel like the best example that I can give is when I see men in the jungle who are like, I'm a medicine man, but then don't do the like years and years and years and years and years of study that is required. And then they go and they serve medicine, and there's a big ego to it, and you could sense it immediately. I would see it with men immediately when they came into the jungle and would tell me, I'm a shaman, I'm a medicine man, I'm an ayahuasquero, yajecero, I do ceremonies, I make money from it. And I would just kind of be like, all right, we'll see. And I would get into ceremony with them and I would see how they carried themselves and I would see how they would move through the space. I would listen to their songs and I would just kind of be like, yeah, I don't know. I don't think so, actually. You could be. I think you could be. I think you have the potential, but are you going to actually shift into that divine masculine archetype that is like the really, really fucking hard work and many, many years of just constant humility and having to say, I don't know shit, and like going through it and proving yourself, right? And I think it's very similar for women, like the all talk, no game. And I think women get very scared of action a lot of time because we've coded action and being direct and being penetrative energy, specifically within spiritual spaces, as like, no, but that's the man's job. And it's like, well, how are you going to birth yourself into the woman that you want to be if you're scared of taking action with the things that you want to do? You have to be able to bring that up. You have to be able to embody that because if not, you're going to be waiting around for a man to create that for you. And your life is your responsibility. You have to create who you want to be, what your act of service is going to be to this life. And you have to be able to rely on your divine masculine to help you do it.
Yeah, to make this personal for a second, I am going through that and have been through that to some extent. After 2 years of working with my primary teacher, Armando, he gave me the blessing to serve medicine. And he's like, you're ready, you've done the work, it's time to serve medicine. And I had a mental rule to myself that I didn't want to serve medicine until I had 10 years of experience. That I really wanted to put the reps in and see, the 1 in 100 people that are really difficult clients, people going through the really extreme processes. Okay, how does my teacher handle the really difficult people? Because, 8 out of 10 times it's going to be pretty smooth sailing, it's pretty standard. Most people can handle, the majority of experiences within a year or two of training. But it's the 1 in 100 or the 1 in 10 kind of events that take a long time just to see enough clients, to see enough people go through their process. And, I went back to see my teacher at about 2.5 years in, and he's like, "So, have you been serving medicine?" And I was like, "Oh, it's kind of like, I don't feel it, like I don't trust it." And he's like, "Come on, like we've done so much work together. Get your shit together. Like start serving medicine." I was like, "All right." He gave me a pretty strong like lecture about like, "Hey, the world needs this medicine. We've done the work. It's time to serve." And I think that's the role of elders on the path, is that when we have this hesitation or when we have kind of doubts, like, "Oh, I don't know if I'm a medicine person. I can't call myself a shaman." It's the elders that say, "No, start, take action, get into it." And yeah, I started serving medicine this year and have had beautiful experiences so far, but I did wait 9.5 years to serve medicine from first drinking and starting.
Which is much longer than most people. I know so many people truly who would like come to the jungle for like a month and then be like, all right, I'm gonna go back to Miami and, charge $450 per ceremony and call myself a taita. Like it's really wild to me. And I understand it and I try not to judge so much because I also think that these plants are immensely intelligent and that they are going to find their way in the world. Otherwise, the jungle would not have opened up to the rest of the West and like allowed people into these territories in order to learn with these plants. And so I try to just like surrender to the fact that there's a divine intelligence that is so much greater than I am. Um, but yeah, I think that there's an immense lack of responsibility. And I can also speak to a different side of things. My path, I've gone very deep with plant medicines. I love them. I'll continue to walk with them, hopefully for, many, 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 many years. But I'm much deeper into my like midwifery studies right now and going into birth work. And you see a very similar thing with lack of true elders and support and community and spiritual initiation moving into the role of a birth keeper, a midwife, a doula, all of that kind of stuff. And you see a very severe distortion of how women then show up with other women, and you see total lack of like actual preparation, not just in terms of um true just like basics. Like, do you know anatomy? Do you know physiology? Do you know the stages of labor? Do you know what to do postpartum, immediately postpartum for a mother? Do you know what to do if there's like severe hemorrhaging? Like just simple basic stuff like that. But then also the psycho spiritual deep, deep, deep initiation work that is required in order to walk alongside mothers, not just throughout the birth, but like through their whole preconception period before they even get to creating a baby, right? Throughout their gestation period, in the birth, in the postpartum. Traditionally, a midwife would be there to initiate women into their bleeding years when they're teenagers moving into like true womanhood, right? How do you carry yourself with that? Like the complete lack of, I would say, like initiated elders who stand in those spaces to really support you. We see that showing up as a deep wound in birth work. And that's like a big shadow that I've had to move through in myself, of really saying like, wow, I'm nowhere near ready to show up for a mother in birth. It's going to take me a long time and I'm deeply committed to that, probably 10 years of study before I can really show up. And what a gift to like finally be humbled in that, right? But to get there, I had to get to the divine masculine that was like, shut up. You don't know shit. Like, actually put in the work, right?
Yeah, you touched on the inversion of how does the masculinity or how does men get distorted and how do females get distorted. And I think this is a good topic to dive into of, okay, what does the distorted masculinity look like? And for me, it's violence. And it's violence with oneself, with poor self-talk, depressive, aggressive thoughts, which then ripples out into the real world, into 3D physical reality. And what is the distortion of femininity? And for me, that's manipulation. And someone who is both at their core manipulating themselves and manipulating how they appear in the world and how they talk to people, how they engage with other people, and then manipulating the whole world around them. And I think the cure for men is kindness, softness with themselves, and patience. And it comes from fixing and addressing the poor self-talk or aggressive self-talk, which then leads to much kinder actions in the real world. And for women, I think the cure is honesty, honesty with themselves to say, hey, I'm really struggling with this. Or, hey, I'm going through this process. I've got no idea what the fuck is going on. And it can be really hard to figure this out yourself. And we were both talking to how elders are essential in, for me with my elder, like he was like, stop being so anxious about it. Stop being like so scared. Just start. Like you're ready. I have confidence in you. You'll do a good job. And interesting to hear your story. Like, how did you stop manipulating yourself and how did you step into honesty?
Oh, big question. I mean, I think, I went through a really, really painful and hard breakup last November that I was not expecting, um, consciously, but I think on a soul level, I knew like, okay, yeah, the lessons here have been learned, and this isn't a pattern that I want to keep repeating. And a big thing that has come in, I guess, the 6 months now has been me having to fully take responsibility for my part in things. And I think that it's maybe the first relationship ever that I've been able to look at myself in the mirror and to be like, wow, in the exact ways that I feel like I was manipulated, that I was lied to, that I was betrayed, that I was abandoned, blah, 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 all of the shit that I could put on my ex-partner, who I have a lot of gratitude and respect for, and still a lot of deep love for what we shared. I can see how much I was really, really manipulating myself in that relationship, which I think I know actually that many, 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 many women can can understand like this story, because I think that there's so many women who say, I want a really healthy divine union. I want a really loving partnership with a man who can show up in a good way. I think that's all what we want truly at our core. And what I've come to understand is that I was not actually ready and available for like a genuine, healthy, loving, safe, long-term committed partnership, because I was only ever going after men who had told me from the very beginning, I am not available. From the very beginning, being like, yeah, cool, let's see what happens, but like, I'm not really looking for what you're looking for. And I know that so many women hear that and they're like, ding, 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 that's the one, you know? And what I would say about that is that there's one part, which is like thinking that we can change other people. We can't, right? Thinking that we can change men, especially women love to try to change men. It's like our favorite thing. We see them and we say, oh, he's so great. I'm going to make him even better. I'm going to mold him into something better. Because for some reason, I think that I know what a better man means. And so I'm going to like manipulate and force and lie to myself and betray myself and abandon myself by being with someone who isn't ready for what I'm saying I'm ready for. And in that process of that breakup and really taking full stock of like, okay, what do I actually want in this life? Because what's being reflected back to me isn't that. What was being reflected was that what I wanted was to continue a really codependent, addictive, unkind, unloving expression of relationship. Not that there wasn't kindness, not that there wasn't love, but at the core, it was a lot of self abandonment, both for me and for him. And to finally say to myself, why would I ever want to be with another person that wouldn't want to genuinely be with me long term, if that's what I'm saying I want? And so in that process, there was no blame that I placed on him. Truly, I was like, you're perfect the way you are. God made you perfect. God brought you into my life for the perfect reason to show me this, that actually, at the end of the day, this is all on me. This is what I called in. And so I think over the past 6 months, it's been this unbelievable unraveling of like, wow, all of the ways in which women are incapable of true surrender, are incapable of really deeply trusting men, incapable of really deeply trusting ourselves, deeply trusting God more than anything, saying, like, God, I don't know. You control the timeline. Truly, you guide me wherever it is that I am going to show up with my most loving expression. Show me what my path of service is. Show me what a true loving union can look like, because I don't know. Women don't want to do that. We don't want to give up control. We want to say, that's the guy, and I'm going to change him, and I'm going to make him into something that he's not. And that's not honest. That's not loving. And it's deep work for women. And there's a lot more that I could say about this. And I've done other episodes about this kind of stuff that people can listen to. But I think that that's been my process of like, in order to be honest with another person, you have to be honest with yourself. And in order to be honest with yourself, you have to really, really feel the pain of what dishonesty and self betrayal and self abandonment creates within you. And to choose, like, I think I'm good with that story. I think that pattern is really tired. And I think that that's not what love actually means in myself, in my lineage, in my community, and hopefully eventually in true partnership. Like, what is it that I came here on earth to do? It's love. Okay, well, then what is that going to actually be?
Thank you for sharing. And let me share something and see if it sticks and resonates, because to piece this together, like the foundation of what you were going through and then what we've been talking about, it sounds like when you two came together, you were both in a juvenile masculine, and you both kind of didn't have the wisdom of how the world works or what you really wanted, or to really see the partner in clarity of where they're truly at. And I mean, a lot of people, very common human thing to idolize someone, to project onto them and to imagine them as what they could be, to fall in love with their potential. And what you were describing is that you developed the wisdom to be like, you know what, this relationship isn't working. And that you were stepping into the divine masculine of being like, you know what, I really don't know if I can see this working out. Like, I don't think he's ready. I don't think our souls are compatible. And yeah, it sounds like you were stepping into the divine masculine of having the wisdom to see things clearly and to see cause and effect. And then your partner wasn't there yet. And that seems like the core of the relationship, that, when you came together at the start, you were both pretending and maybe manipulating each other and trying, like talking the talk without walking the walk. And then as you started walking and developing the wisdom, the intuition, the clarity, it's no longer compatible. And you made the hard decision.
Yeah, 100%. And I think what you were talking about of like when you start developing your own inner divine masculine, there's just like a part of you that's it can't tolerate bullshit anymore. And what was painful and beautiful about that separation was that both my partner and I were on the same page about it. We were like, yeah, we've unfortunately, but also fortunately outgrown this, which is such a hard thing to have to say to someone that you love and someone that you imagine a future with. And like, thank God that I got to that place, and that hopefully a lot of people can get to that place where your divine masculine comes online and is able to see through the illusions and the bullshit and just be like, no, you have to really, the divine masculine yang, like master of time. You have to really look at this long term and see if this is like the life you want to set up for yourself, right? And one of my teachers, something that she talks about a lot with women is we're not able to really be in a healthy, loving relationship with a man who is like spiritually mature enough to handle it until our like she calls it like her inner king, your inner like warrior king comes online, and you feel it because you feel this shift within you where you just stop tolerating bullshit, and anything that is not what's actually your heart's true desire just loses all interest, and you stop betraying yourself, and you stop going after guys who are like, I'm not super available, or I don't want kids, or like marriage isn't my thing. The younger juvenile part of you would have been like, I can win their heart, I can convince them, I can change it. The divine warrior part of you is just like, that sounds boring. That's just boring to get into. Like, why would I waste my time when there's so many other men that do want what I want? And so then you're just kind of like, I don't know, you do feel that big shift from that juvenile masculine to the divine masculine, because the divine masculine is just like, no, like games are boring. I think that's really where it is.
Yeah, you can't manipulate someone into growing up, and you can't trick someone into growing up and becoming divine masculine or the king archetype. And I think you can inspire someone, and you can, through doing your own work, really inspire someone to step up, but you can't manipulate them. And if they're not ready and they're not wanting to go to the next level, the only thing to do in some ways is to leave and to be true to yourself and be like, you know what? Thank you very much. I'm so grateful. I love you. I'm grateful for everything we shared. But to be honest to myself and to stop manipulating myself, I have to leave. Or I have to have trust and faith that, I can go, I can leave, I can grow myself. And if we're meant to come back together, we will. And if not, something even better will come.
Yeah, two things on that. One is something that some of my teachers, Kida Stache and Maura Sternberg, shared, which is I think a lot of women think that men want us to be like, I'm fully devoted to you. I will always be here. It doesn't matter what happens, like ride or die, like I'm here, which is actually very unsafe for men because men are like, no, if there's a moment where things are actually really unsafe, if there's a moment where I'm not showing up well, if there's a moment where I'm fucking up, like I need your response, your honest, true yin reveal. That's what they always call it, like the yin reveal, when the feminine is being fully honest. Like, this structure that you've set up for me in terms of like the yang that you've created in this relationship isn't safe. And like, if something doesn't change, I'm out. The yang needs that. And the way that they described it is saying, being able to show up as a woman and to say, if it's the most loving thing for me to do for myself, for you, out of respect for our own growth and spiritual evolution, if it is the most loving thing to do, I will leave. That's when a man actually feels safe because he's like, okay, she's going to be honest with me. That's really what a man wants. He wants that true honesty. And then another thing that I want to touch on, which I think we're going to go like deeper into this in the extended episode, around like a lot of ways in which women use sexual manipulation. But I think this is a really important thing to say, which is like, as a woman, you cannot, please, you cannot manipulate a man into fatherhood. You cannot manipulate a man into showing up as a father. It is like a deeply, deeply disrespectful, unloving, unkind, and warped inversion of the power of the feminine, the sexual power of the feminine. Men really deserve the time to go through their stages of evolution to show up at a point where they're like, I've done the work in myself and I've done the work externally to feel ready for fatherhood. Pushing a man or trying to manipulate a man into fatherhood is like one of the worst shadow sides of femininity that exists. And I think that it plays into a lot of male violence and male hatred towards the feminine because it's like, yo, I didn't feel initiated. right? And in the same way that women want to be able to go through their initiation from maiden into mother, which happens like throughout their pregnancy and throughout their birthing process and postpartum, obviously, like men need that same spaciousness in their preconception time to really move towards that. And so manipulation is like a big, big theme with women. And the one that I really want to press on is like, if your man is like, yo, I'm not even close to being ready for serious commitment, for serious kids, you say, cool, I love you. I appreciate you. Thank you for your honesty. I will find a man who is ready because pushing him is just, yeah, it's a big abuse of power.
Yeah, I think for a lot of men, the greatest fear is being trapped in the wrong relationship, being trapped with the wrong partner. And on the flip side, I think for a lot of women, the greatest fear is being alone and not being in partnership. And what you were speaking to is, okay, how do women manipulate men to trap them? And I think sexuality is used quite a lot, and having children is like the end stage. And it talks to, I think what men really want is freedom to pursue their goals and their mission with a supportive partner. And if that's cut off, if it's a partner who they know is not right for them, not right for their mission, not right for what they came to this earth to do, that's the biggest fear. Is like, you know what, I'm not even going to be able to start my big mission. I'm not even going to be able to start my big adventure because I'm not with the right partner. And interesting to hear. Do you think that's what women feel? That their greatest fear is being alone? Because I think for men it is being trapped and being trapped in a state where they can't pursue their big adventure.
Yeah, I think that's 100% accurate. And I know that that's accurate because that was one of the many reasons that I separated from my partner. It was a clear understanding that our purposes had been aligned for a time and they were no longer aligned. And I was trying really hard to be like, come back over here with me and do this thing. And he was like, no, that my purpose is not in that direction. And I'm so sorry, but like you have to go with it because where I'm going is not where you want to go, actually. That's not the life you want to live. And I know you enough and I love you enough and I respect you enough to say, like, no, it's not going to work out. And as heartbreaking as it was in the moment, now 6 months later, I can look back on it and be like, wow, thank God. Like, he's so right. I totally did not want to go in the direction of his purpose. I want him to go in that direction. I want him to do what is the most fulfilling for him. And it is so not going to be fulfilling for me at all. So I do agree with like the masculine side of that, and I definitely agree. I think for a woman being alone just from a purely biological perspective means lack of safety. It means that you don't have a protector. It means that you don't have someone who would, if like the worst comes to worst, someone that would kill for you if you were in a really dangerous situation. And so when I think about there's obviously like the romantic aspect to it of wanting to experience love and intimacy and all of the closeness and connection that comes with relationships. But then there's also a biological perspective that is like, if I don't have a man by my side who makes me feel really protected and safe, and if I don't have access to resources, especially if I have children, that's like a huge thing for women. Like being abandoned by a man while you're maybe pregnant with him or while you have young babies or kids any age. That then pushes a woman into a really intense hard spot where she has to like take on the man's role to provide for her kids, which she doesn't really want to do most of the time. Like ideally, she would be able to stay in her mothering role and be very present, and when she doesn't get to do that, it's painful and it's exhausting more than anything. It's really, really exhausting for a woman. So I would say I think you're totally on track with that for sure.
Yeah, it seems like it's the short-term trade that a woman can trap a man with a child and think, okay, if I trap him like this, trap such an aggressive word, if, we're forced to come into this container and this relationship with a child, short term, it might work. But long term, if, the man doesn't feel supported and doesn't feel happy and like he's really going after his purpose, everyone's going to be miserable. Like he's not going to turn up as a father. He's not going to show up as the provider. He's not going to be inspired and really bring fun and abundance to the relationship. Everyone's going to suffer. And it might be that, okay, the relationship works for a year, 2 years, 5 years. But long term, I think everyone ends up in a really tough situation when manipulation and dishonesty is the core.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Okay, well, I feel like we're kind of getting towards the end. I would love maybe to hear closing thoughts just about ways in which you yourself have been cultivating divine masculinity and the different tools that you have at your disposal, the different teachings, things that you're writing about, anything that you want to leave people with as kind of action step, because the divine masculine loves action.
Yeah, you nailed it. And for me, the transition from juvenile masculine to divine masculine happens with wisdom and happens with learning how the world works, learning skills, learning mastery in some niche, in some field. And so I think for a lot of people, it's a process of finding what do I love? Like, what do I really feel inspired by? And what can I work really hard on that feels like play and feels like fun? And with that comes building up wisdom and knowledge. And I think there's a process of trying lots of different things, of whatever kind of is calling to your heart, of something that seems interesting, and pursuing that and seeing how it works. And then it's a game of, okay, how do I take as much action as I can in this niche, in this area? How do I really shoot as many arrows as I can and see how they unfold, see what the cause and effect are? And then it's just time. So I think for a lot of people, to make this very practical, it comes from being healthy in themselves physically. And that might be, having stable wake up, bedtime, exercising daily, meditating, eating really well, cutting out all the shit like drinking, drugs, substance misuse, and getting healthy in oneself. Because when we get healthier in ourselves, we can do more. And when we can do more, then we can take more action and learn more. And it's like the healthier that anyone can get, male or female, and the faster they can walk along their path on their purpose in their niche, the faster they're going to get out of juvenile masculine. And I think it's a great blessing. And I think my advice to a lot of people would be try as many things that you're really inspired by, get healthy, and then work really hard on them and build as much wisdom and knowledge as you can. And that's what I've been doing. That's been my process. My particular niches are plant medicines. I've been obsessed with them for 10 years now. And then also building. So building a house and building a garden. And having that, like having the energy to learn and make mistakes, learn from mistakes, have successes and learn from successes. That I think is the process of how to get out of juvenile masculine into divine masculine.
Beautiful, very clear and succinct. And I think a lot of the time people think that it's going to be like a really complex process. The reality is that it's very simple. It's things that you were saying, like go to bed and wake up at a reasonable time. You know, like eat well, take care of yourself, exercise, spend time in nature, and find the things that really drive you and that light you up and that inspire you and that you feel internally like, yeah, I want to devote my life to this thing. And maybe try it out. And if it doesn't work, okay, it doesn't work. Move on to the next thing, move on to the next thing, move on to the next thing, whatever. But have the courage in yourself to find what it is that is going to be your purpose, not just for men, but for women as well. Like, and purpose also, to clarify, purpose doesn't equate to like money. Your purpose in this life is not necessarily how you're going to financially support yourself. It would be wonderful if we could all support ourselves while doing our purpose. It's not always possible or not all the time possible, but finding that thing that you want to take action towards and then just do the thing, do the damn thing, right?
Totally. And that's a good note to refine on is, okay, how does someone find their purpose? And I think there has to be a passion there, like something we're genuinely curious about. there has to be a need for it in the world. Okay, like if I get really good at this, will the world become a better place? Has to be also financially rewarding too. Like we have to pay the bills. And then the final thing is fun. Like, can I do this for a really long time? Do I really want to build this skill and build this area of my life up with enjoyment and with fun? And if you can get a combination of those things, so really being curious about it, it being needed by the world, being financially lucrative, and then being fun, that for me, that's the sweet spot. That's how people find their purpose.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I say we wrap up this part of the interview and just give you some time to share how people can connect with you, any of the books that you have available, where they can be in contact with you, all the good stuff.
Yeah, so the best place to contact me is probably through Instagram, just through direct message there. I'm on leo.vanv on Instagram. And then my book is The Burger Experience. I also wrote another book about the shamanism of Donald Trump, but not with my full name. And if people are interested in that, that's an interesting one. And yeah, I'm in Peru. I'm here building a garden, building a house. And in about a year's time, I'll have a retreat center here. So in about a year's time, I'll be welcoming people that are not just friends and family to drink medicine with me in my garden on the land here.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Leo. It has been such a joy. I'm excited to see what comes up in our extended conversation over on Substack for subscribers. The link will be in bio if you wanted to listen to that. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Claire. That was fun.